Now you have individuals who literally will die without the government's assistance. And that is a reality of the situation. What happens if there's chaos in your town? They're coming to knock on your door, even if you're okay. So you have to be worried about the situation, about real unemployment. And that doesn't mean if you're in Europe. That means everywhere around the world, major cities are going to be under fire.
This video is brought to you by Reluctant Preppers. Click here to subscribe for free to reluctantpreppers.com. Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with financeandliberty.com, and back with us today is David Quintieri from themoneygps.com, the author of The Money GPS. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
All right, today I wanted to discuss that currently the U.S. has a negative GDP. It's at negative 2.9%, and this is actually the worst annual rate in 5 years. What is your perspective on this?
It's about time that the numbers are actually starting to show the truth. That's what I'm seeing. Because, we've expected this for so long. Why is the economy at a standstill, yet the numbers are still showing positive? That's something that's been really bugging me for such a long time, and now they're negative. But the fact remains is that they're still printing all this money. They're still in a deficit, 50 million people on food stamps, and all these other statistics like this. And now the numbers are negative. So what does that mean? That the numbers are actually even more negative than what they're promoting. But at the very least, if this continues the way it is, hopefully by next quarter, they will have to admit that they're in a recession. Now, I believe that they're actually more like in a depression based on the unemployment rate. However, at the very least, they'll say that they're in trouble at this point. That's what I'm hoping for.
Right, and I know some people estimate real inflation at around 10% instead of what the government says, around 2%. If you take GDP and adjust it to probably a more accurate estimation of inflation, you'd probably get around negative 10% annual GDP right now.
That's right. However, when you just make up the numbers, you can suggest whatever. The way they calculate inflation is so fraudulent, it should be criminal. They do not include the most important factors which would determine your cost of living. So, of course, they're going to promote some 2% rate. In fact, they're saying sometimes they have trouble getting to 2% in the inflation rates. It's pretty sad to see this. But, I mean, if you're not going to include food and energy prices, then there really is no point in having this cost of living indicator. There really isn't. So that's how they're getting to these numbers. But what I'm saying is that at least in the media, they can at least, hopefully, if there is a recession indicator coming along, that will wake up the mainstream media at least to this point.
I know that the Federal Reserve recently tapered once again. They've been tapering ever since they were printing $85 billion per month. Now they're down to only $35 billion per month. What is your perspective on this? Do you see that they're going to continue to taper, or do you see that they're going to reverse it, or do you not even believe that they're tapering currently? What is your perspective on this?
It's a little hard to gather because the Fed is such a They claim to be transparent. However, they're the exact opposite, of course. So it is very hard to really tell what they're doing. However, I don't think this is the case. They said that they printed a couple $1 trillion back during the bailouts. However, with that limited audit that came out, they printed 16 trillion. So what they're doing behind the scenes is anyone's guess, really. However, the fact remains is that they cannot stop their schemes. They have to print more money. They have to keep interest rates low. Now, they said that they were going to have to, or are predicting that they will be increasing the rates after this taper slows down. So they're going to bring the taper all the way by the end of this year, supposedly. And then early next year, they're going to have to start increasing the interest rates. However, I don't think this is going to be possible. And if they do, they have something else up their sleeve because the economy is dead. It's long dead. And there's no way it's going to be able to continue continue the way it is. And in fact, there's pretty much only one indicator that is running semi-positive, and that is the stock market itself. So the equities are being pumped up with all these trillions. However, none of this money is going to the actual citizens.
I know in a recent video you discussed how there are so many people on welfare food stamps. There are 11 million disability beneficiaries, and the numbers just keep going up and up and up. And some people seem to be taking advantage of the system. What is your perspective on this, and who's actually going to pay the bill for these?
Well, when you set up a system that allows people to abuse it, allows people to use it to its maximum potential, that's exactly what will happen. And they are doing so at a dramatic rate. You're looking at the food stamp program, you're looking at the disabilities, as we said, and all these other programs. There's over 100 million people on some sort of food assistance right now in the U.S. alone. There's all kinds of people who are basically so dependent on the government. But the fact remains is that that is exactly what the government wants. When they have a voting bloc that is highly dependent, guess who they're going to vote for? That's right. So that's what they're trying to accomplish with this. And they want people to basically extend to their maximum, get into debt as much as they possibly can, and then they'll be forced to do what the government says. So right now we're having a big problem with the disability and with the food stamps and all these other indicators. And I only see this expanding because the system allows them to do so and actually in many ways encourages them to do so. So of course that's going to be like this. Of course they're going to want people to take the Obama phones, the Obamacare, because they're swindled into thinking that it's free, and the people just don't know what they're getting themselves into.
And getting back to this, I mean, what is your perspective? It seems like the government, as you said, wants this to happen. I've talked about before, that it seems like when there is a crisis, the government just tries to step in and save everyone and takes away our liberty. Is that what is happening right now?
That's what's always happened. This is one of the biggest themes of my book and of my YouTube channel, and I talk about the loss of liberty because that's what's happening. And they use the financial system as their means of attacking us because they have full control, because the Federal Reserve, the head of the snake, is taking full control. So basically they set up a system intentionally that we are continuously getting more and more poor, so that we have to continue to basically latch on to the government. That's the whole purpose of this structure.
And what specific liberties did you want to expand a little bit on? Because it seems like maybe to the average person who's getting welfare or food stamps, it might seem to them that it's, I even have more liberty now because I have more money, or I can buy more food. So what specific liberties are being taken away from us at the same time, though?
We're losing the ability to have control, first of all, of our own money. So they continuously increase taxation upon us. For example, if you look over into France, certain individuals being taxed at over 100% of their wealth. That is a complete loss of their liberty financially. So what's happening with us is that we're losing the ability to, for example, with our, in the U.S., you have your First Amendment rights. You're losing your freedom of speech because nobody's allowed to speak up against the system. They're not allowed to have any of their rights at all. Slowly but surely, they're all being taken away. You're not innocent until proven guilty. That is long gone. There's no such thing as reality anymore. So with the financial system specifically, what they do is they set up a socialized system. So they take your money, your tax money, your hard-earned money, and they give it to who they think needs it most. That is what I would consider theft. They're taking your money without your consent. You cannot opt out of the system, and that, I believe, is totally against libertarian ideas. You don't necessarily need to be a libertarian or consider yourself a libertarian to believe that. However, don't you feel that your own earnings, the things that you work so hard for, is just being taken out and then distributed around the country, and who knows, being sent offshore to build a $1 billion embassy in Iraq, and who knows what else. So this is what I talk about, a loss of liberty all the time. You're not allowed to know where your money goes because it is not transparent as it should be.
Speaking of losing the liberty to control our own money, in Australia, they recently changed the definition of inactive bank accounts or dormant bank accounts from bank accounts that have been inactive for 7 years to 3 years. And now, since the beginning of the year, the Australian government has been able to seize $360 million out of inactive bank accounts. I know you discussed a little bit about this on the SGT report. What is your perspective on these apparent bail-ins, and do you see bail-ins coming to America?
Absolutely. This is one of the biggest things that I talk about all the time because it is something that people don't understand. And the average person, they take their savings, they put it in their bank. However, that is not truly insured. It is an asset of the bank, not your asset being held at the bank. Those days are long gone. You have countries like Australia, they basically people put their money in there. Who knows why they're so-called dormant? However, the bank basically just says, that's our money, so we're going to take it. And that's what they do. But the fact remains is that they really need your grandmother's $1,000 or $2,000. Who knows what it is? They have the printing press. They borrow money at basically 0%. They do not need this money at all. So it is part of a more grand scheme in order to make us poor, to put us down, pushing us down. That's exactly what they desire. Now, the bail-ins are not just in Australia. They are all over the world. We saw it first in Cyprus when they first implemented it, and now Australia, Spain has also introduced it. In Canada, it's in the 2013 budget report where they use the words, actually using the words bail-in regime. And then they had the audacity to suggest that bail-in regime didn't mean that they were going to take individuals' own deposits. They said, no, we have special funds set up just in case something happens. Well, I have a question. Where were these special funds during the bailouts only a few years ago? And that is just gets me going because it is such a lie and people just don't believe it. But as long as they read it on their mainstream media, they're going to believe it and they're going to go ahead being just nothing but sheeple.
So getting back to the situation in the United States, what is your perspective? I know you made a video recently about that, as we're talking about, the situation is not getting any better. Around the world also, it seems like that you were looking at different countries' actual unemployment rate, and you were saying that it seems like unemployment around the world is about 25%, the rate at which it was around the Great Depression.
That's exactly what's happening right now. This is what's really concerning me, is because the real unemployment rate, particularly in Europe right now, and it's especially noticeable when you look at youth unemployment rates, and you're seeing such high rates that are actually the same as they had during the Great Depression. So when I say that, we're actually sort of heading in a depression phase right now, it isn't me exaggerating. It is really the truth. Look at the unemployment rate, but then you have the added bonus that the individuals are not prepared, because back in those days people had farms, they were able to live off their own land, they were able to basically sustain themselves. Now you have individuals who literally will die without the government's assistance, and that is a reality of the situation. What happens if there's chaos in your town? They're coming to knock on your door even if you're okay. So you have to be worried about the situation, about real unemployment, and that doesn't mean if you're in Europe, that means everywhere around the world, major cities are going to be under fire. We saw it in London, a big city just like that, and only a few years ago was literally under fire. And this can happen in every town, in every city, and it should be something that you need to look into.
A lot of people are waking up to the economic situation right now. Even Steve Forbes wrote in his book recently that, quote, "The U.S. central bank's vastly misguided monetary policies are now setting the stage for a new economic and social catastrophe, one that could rival the financial crisis and horrors of the 1930s." End quote. What is your perspective on Steve Forbes, a very influential person, talking about that where it seems like we could be headed towards an economic catastrophe?
Well, what I notice is that there are different levels of the elite. Now, Steve Forbes is a high-level guy, but he really wants to basically make money off the system. He wants the insider deals. But he doesn't want to see everything destroyed, because then all of his wealth is going to be evaporated. So he wants to basically be in control, have some good insider intelligence, and be able to continuously make his billions. But he does not want to see the U.S. being trampled on and being completely destroyed, and that's where it's headed. So he knows some information. He sees where it's going. These guys are 5, 10, 20 years ahead of us, and they realize where it's going, and they're actually making it public, hoping that this will be stopped. And just individuals, the small-time individuals, don't have a chance, because what we're seeing isn't the insider information. Warren Buffett, for example, another big guy, he's getting deals that are so advanced, we can't get those, what they call sweetheart deals. So you're investing in the stock market, he's on a whole different level.
David, but do you see there are ways that the little guy can prepare? I know I have said this, and also Mike Maloney has said this, that if people prepare now, then they won't be as quick to have the government step in and save everyone and take away our liberties. So do you see that there are ways that we can prepare now?
That's exactly what we need to do. And of course, when I make reference to this, I'm talking about the people who are not prepared. And you need to get fully prepared. This is extremely important. So one of those obvious and simple ways is to own physical, and I really need to stress physical, that means in your own possession, hold gold and silver bullion, not just one or the other. You should own both. And a lot of people talk about percentages, which should I own? I believe that a 50-50 split is the honest way to do it, because we never know what's going to happen. But number one, gold and silver, and I also like junk silver as well. I do recommend owning in the smallest quantities, smallest denominations as possible, because that way it's easier to trade, it's easier to sell, and it's really the most abundant, and we can get it no problem. You might end up paying a higher premium when you're buying them. I still think it's worth it. And, definitely right off the bat, I would suggest to you gold, silver, junk silver, the number one things that you can do today to protect yourself, to protect your wealth and preserve your wealth. That's what I talk about a lot in my book and on my YouTube channel as well.
And speaking of that, what do you say to the people who say it doesn't seem like the gold market over the past couple of years has been doing well? It went down from 1900 to now 1300, and silver has gone down from almost 50 to below 20.
Absolutely. And it can go down even further. But what we're talking about isn't gold and silver. That's gold and silver paper. And as far as I'm concerned, that could be pushed down as far as they want. But you have real gold and silver, that means you are wealthy. You have real wealth. And ultimately, the price will be manipulated by JP Morgan and others, and they'll do whatever they want to those prices. And that's the futures market. But when it really comes down to it, if you own this finite resource, gold or silver, you have something that they do not have. All of these investors are going out there, they're chasing the stock market, they're investing in all these banks, they're investing in all these other companies, these silly .com type companies, and who knows where they'll be during the crash. I can give you a hint, it's going to be lower than where it is today. But gold and silver are real wealth. The actual value, the number of them, whether they go up or down, to me, I know it's an unpopular thing to say, but it doesn't matter, because it's ultimately the real goods, the real assets, which are going to translate into the next monetary system. You brought up Mike Maloney. Mike Maloney talks about basically every 30 to 40 years we have a new system, and we are overdue, and I totally agree with that. And when we go into this next system, do you think that the U.S. paper dollars are going to be sufficient enough to provide for your family? I have to disagree. You need real assets, and I will just mention once again, gold, silver, junk silver. That's what's going to transfer into this next monetary system.
Right, and I know I've heard that it's basically, you can think of gold and silver as insurance. It's like when you have health insurance, it's not as if you're hoping the health insurance will increase in value or you're wanting to use that health insurance. It's just there for if a disaster strikes. In the case of gold and silver, it's not like we should be hoping for the economic collapse to happen, but if it does happen, we'll be prepared financially, and possibly even benefit financially from it.
I totally agree with you, and that's the way I look at it. It's an insurance policy. When you put your money in the bank, you're basically saying, I hope that this bank stays in business, and if not, the government will come out and they'll save me because I have less than $100,000 in this account, and FDIC is going to bail me out. I'm the depositor. I don't have to worry. But that's not the way you should look at it, because historically that hasn't worked. Look at all these countries around the world that have had bank runs. And sure, in many cases, they got their money back from the government. But are you willing to really risk your savings, your life savings? I don't really desire this. I choose to prepare for myself, for my family, and protect my family. I've done my research, and I know it's not worth the risk. My savings are for me, and I need to keep them so that I can pass that down from generation to generation.
Right, and if the whole system crashes, it's not like the FDIC can bail out everyone.
Well, that's exactly right. If they're able to bail out one bank that goes bankrupt, if it's a small bank, they could probably do so. However, they don't have a fraction of a percent of enough money to bail out any of these really big banks. That is a scary thought. When you think that all of the money that you have, possibly your parents, your grandparents, whoever's listening to this, that all of your money is basically riding on the fact that everyone's keeping their money in. And that's it. That's the only thing keeping you from losing your money, is people taking it out. So I don't trust it. I never do. You need to prepare for yourself, because where there is risk, there is fragility and there will be destruction.
Well, David Quintieri, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. But before we let you go, did you want to share any last thoughts with our viewers?
The most important thing that we need to pay attention to is the bail-ins. This is something I'm stressing over and over and over again, because people are simply not even to this degree prepared. Maybe you can't afford 10 ounces of gold and 1,000 ounces of silver, but the very most important thing you can do is removing your money from the banking system. Now, people need to think, well, where am I going to put my money? Well, number one, you need to buy real assets. If you have those savings, you need to buy real assets, but you need to pay your bills too. Totally understandable. I highly recommend that you keep enough money you need in the bank to do your daily transactions, to live out a daily life, for your rent, for groceries, for etc. But your savings need to be kept in real assets. It is extremely crucial, and I don't want to be here in a few years saying that I told you so. That is not what I desire. I'm here yelling and screaming, just pleading with people to prepare. It is so essential. Please listen to me. Do your own research. I literally wrote a book so that I could hopefully convince people that real assets are essential. And I'm hoping that more and more people are taking that advice.
Did you want to share with the viewers where they can find you on the internet and where they can pick up your book if they're interested?
Absolutely. My book is available on Amazon. You can look me up on there. And you can find my YouTube channel at The Money GPS. And I hope to see a lot of you over there. And some of you already may be a subscriber on there. I want to say hello to you. And we need to share. We need to get this information out to everyone we can.
Once again, David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
This video was brought to you by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Prepper's latest interview, where retired U.S. Navy SEAL Lieutenant Larry Yatch offers expert advice on how you can protect yourself, your property, and your family. Click here to subscribe for free to FinanceAndLiberty.com and also our sponsor, ReluctantPreppers.com, helping you be aware and prepared.